If human experiments were made legal, what would scientists first experiment about? Psychology would become a lot more precise. And a lot more traumatic for subjects too. Just use those test subjects for physics, chemistry, medical experiments afterwards. You can't have traumatic subjects if they are dead. D classes are a limited, but very useful versatile resources. We can't afford to waste them. Aesthetical genetic engineering. Seeing how much people request it. If ethics is completely thrown out the window, I have no doubt in my mind that the first research that governments sponsor is genetically engineering super soldiers. It's very likely been happening in China for years. Source 2 degrees in biotech. Another source LOL link. Name anything generally considered bad. Go ahead. I'll wait. It's very likely been happening in China for years. Killing political dissidents. Yup. Concentration camps for minorities. Yup. Killing common criminals to harvest their organs. Yup. Invading neighbor states. Yup. Assigning citizens citizenship scores based upon their political submission. Yup. Widespread governmental corruption. Yup. Oligarchical. Dictatorial leadership. Yup. Slave labor and human trafficking. Yup. The only excuse the rest of the world has for not teaming up and conquering them is unrestrained nuclear war. And that Russia, which is to China as fascist Italy was to Nazi Germany, is tacitly on their side. On a much smaller and personal scale. The amount of bad science that comes out of China is shocking. We think pay-to-play journals in the West are bad. In China they are the norm. The amount of science that is just plain wrong, bad, or government sponsored to make the government look good is incredibly high. Never trust a Chinese paper unless it is partnership with a well-known registered Western university or research institute. Edit: I should mention this isn't a fringe, racist opinion of mine. This is a pretty normal opinion in academia, even though the opinion is kept off the official books because there's a lot of research money from China. I imagine some sociologists would really like to pull a Lord of the Flies type thing, where you remove a dozen kids from civilization and see how they adapt. A king did this in the old days, way back when his own word was law. He had children raised feral to see what would happen to them. The guy I heard about was Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II that did this. But upon a Google search you can find more as well. Pharaoh Antiquary of Egypt and King James IV of Scotland are noted. And don't leave us hanging, I'm curious now. They died. True. There were around 50 children and the king did that experiment in order to find out what language they would speak. Hence, what is the original language of the human being? They were being fed and so on, but with the least human contact possible. Nobody ever spoke to them. It didn't take long for them to die. Scientists take this as a proof that human beings depend on social contacts to survive. Edit: since there are so many questions on this, I'm a student who learned about this in university, so please don't take my word for granted. I'm still looking for sources in English for you. What I learned is that children were kept separately. They were fed and were given medical care, but the nurses did not talk to them and tried to touch them as less as possible. The children died of lack of sensorial stimulation. Scientists see that as a proof that human beings need social contacts for survival. It proves nothing regarding the language. That would be nonsense. Edit: 2 found an English source link. Nerve regeneration could help with many conditions like paralysis, deafness, blindness, etc. I had my collarbone plated and screwed with 11 screws after a really bad break. Before the surgery the doctor told me he would do his best to look for the 5 or so nerve endings that cross that area, but they were very small, and most surgeons just cut right through them. I just said thank you before going under. Afterward the doc let me know he found 2, but there were definitely more that he couldn't find. Because of this I couldn't feel any topical pressure applied to the skin surface on my entire chest on the right side, and down my arm stopping halfway between my shoulder and elbow. He told me nerves don't usually grow back, and this odd sensation would last for the rest of my time here on Earth. I went on with life and rehab, until about 6 months after surgery, when I was walking through campus. Suddenly it felt like someone had poured ice water on my right shoulder. It was so sudden I jumped, screamed, and caused the entire quad to look in my direction. I touched my shoulder, and I could feel part of it again. This sensation happened a couple more times and now I have no loss of feeling in any area of my right shoulder. So odd. Edit doing don't and small clarification. I will try to reply to everyone tomorrow. This is the most popular comment I've ever had on Reddit, so please be kind to me. A recent study showed that we are capable of growing and replacing neurons by blocking the scarring that happens when damage is occurred. Basically the brain blocks the path and cuts the damaged piece out of the circuit, but if that is avoided it can grow new neurons. It's quite recent. Maybe a year ago. Putting a child in a giant inflatable ball, periodically poking it with a stick to disprove the hypothesis that it would grow up to ducking hate them. Some children ducking hate you, even if you give them the wrong cereal in the morning. Honestly, how to make viruses and viral infections more efficient yet controlled. This will make the delivery of genetic treatments more effective. Edit AAVs exist. I forgot about that. Thanks to those who pointed it out. How to make viruses and viral infections more efficient yet controlled. I thought you were going to go the weaponized Ebola route on that. Brain transplants, or the ability to transfer someone's consciousness. The day we figure out what consciousness truly is, and how to transfer it, is the day we defeat death. Put me in a giant robot body. I'm all for it. I would pay to watch the brain bots fight each other. Assuming we just throw all ethics out the window, more child psychology experiments. I'd be curious to know if the Stanford prison experiment carries over to children, or if that type of following orders behavior is learned. Yeah. Intentional experiments to work out the best kind of parenting. Plato's Republic style, capturing kids and giving them different kinds of education until you make the perfect ruler. Experiments on identical twins to assess the relationship between nature and nurture. I actually just watched a documentary about this very topic. There was a set of triplets that were split up at birth by an orphanage. Once they found each other and started putting pieces together, they realized that they were not alone. Other twins had also been separated by the same orphanage. The freakiest part was that the homes they went to were homes where the orphanage already had another child placed. They basically controlled the entire family unit without the parents even knowing. Insane. Edit for those interested link. At what angle do we have to hit someone's elbow to produce electricity? Gene editing to the point of being able to produce newborns with specific cosmetic and mechanical traits with near 100% precision. Basically designer babies. Very morally questionable. But imagine being able to prevent all genetic diseases, disorders in all future humans. Even having them born without appendixes and wisdom teeth. That or make real monster girls for the weebs. Extending lifespan. Clones. Edit, thank you guys so much. I have never got that much upvotes on anything. Stem cells and cancer treatment. You ever seen the movie The Island, where people are birthed just to donate their organs to rich people? Sorta like that, but we don't actually need to have another human just grow the organ in an incubator. I think they've already started growing spare human parts on pigs or mice. Imagine a person whose sole job is growing extra kidneys in his own body for transplant. Or extra ears all over his belly. Dunno, ask China. In utero genetic modification, the ethics early on are a bit sketchy. But if this stuff actually works, crippling genetic disorders could be all but eliminated within a couple of decades. Granted, that may lead to designer babies, but with a little regulation we should be fine. I don't want to be that person, but you know what happened to designer breeds of dogs, right? And we could probably fix their defective genes and create healthy designer dogs with those methods. And this is why I'm surprised more gene editing with dogs and cats isn't a thing, rather than just breeding them. It's a living, breathing creature. But pets aren't terrible to give long lives and make more comfortable. Many are made sterile now anyway, so there isn't a need for them to die off quickly to stave off overpopulation and disease. So many things. Human growth development is a big one. A lot of experimental data comes from decades ago when human experimentation was more or less legal. I can think of a few specific topics right now: language acquisition, infant brain development, psychosocial development. Research psychologist here, we do those experiments all the time. Human experiments are not illegal, as the OP suggests. It's just that they have to be ethical. Human nature outside of civilization. If you mean outside of city village life, there are still some nomadic hunter-gatherer groups to study. If you mean outside of social groups entirely, then it's not human nature you're interested in. Human nature essentially involves being in groups just like wolves or lions or ants or any other social creatures. Take a group of kids with no memories yet, from different cultures and backgrounds. Put them all together with no adult influence and see how they turn out. Cat girls when hard to make someone believe the whole point of their lives was cause some weeb wanted to have a girlfriend and couldn't find one. Mind control. They test new drugs on human tissue, then mouse, monkey, then human. If a transgender person was raised in isolation only by robots, having never seen the opposite sex, would they have the compulsion to transition? And if so, transition into what? How could you tell someone is transgender before they were raised? Since all ethical gloves are off, find a transgender person, clone them, boom. You have a baby soon to be transgender person. That is, if we can trust the science behind the idea that the condition is biological and not something learned, imparted. Of course, maybe that's the point of the experiment in the first place. Get a great aid to raise a child, probably by switching a stillborn chimp, gorilla or orangutan with a newborn infant. Repeat this several times, removing the child from its ape mother at different ages. 2, 6, 10. 18. Teach that ape human English and see what we can learn. Medication for pregnant women. Since fetuses can't give consent for medical trials, it's extremely difficult for doctors to get accurate data regarding the effects to the fetus of various medications and treatments that a pregnant mother may need. First, some health preventative measures. Want a baby that we guarantee won't have these terrible genetic defects that you have a chance of passing on. Done. Then aesthetic changes. Want a blonde hair, blue-eyed kid? Or shall we go brown hair, brown eyes, to make sure your kid doesn't have the traits of their actual father? Done. Then physical advantage changes. Want us to have the stamina of one race and height of another race? Done. After decades of this, rich people will use genetic experimentation and modifiers to clearly define their children as rich from birth. Like born with specific birth markings. Or wings. Who knows? Human hybridization. Specifically, what other animals can make us viably pregnant and what animals can become viably pregnant by us. Making cat girls for the weebs. Stopping aging for the people who don't wanna die. Genetical enhancements and intelligence and physical strength would probably also be in there. The nocebo effect. Cloning. It has already been somewhat successful in sheep, and it would certainly be on their interest to see if they can accomplish the fate on a human. You do know that there are several Very successful lines of cloned mice. Right. I think we are well past the point of cloning Dolly at this point. Human experiments are legal, they just have to be approved via showing enough evidence with animal trails that the product isn't going to severely harm someone. And doing drug trials can be extremely lucrative. There are some that will pay tens of thousands of dollars for you to basically lie in a bed. Nurses told me that they get a lot of seasonal workers who basically become professional guinea pigs for the winter. I remember a few years back when there was that drug trial that went badly and some participants went into organ failure. Clinicians were really worried that people would stop signing up for drug trials. The opposite happened because the news mentioned how much they were paid and people, pretty rationally, were like, you can make that much. And that sort of bad stuff is super rare, and those guys are mostly okay now. They had people lining up out the door. The main issue was that they got a flood of people trying to claim compensation and had to keep being like, no, you can't claim compensation for normal expected side effects of your normal medical treatment. Immortality or the afterlife. Trying to take DNA from other animals and coding it into humans so we have their abilities. Imagine having lizard DNA where amputees could grow back limbs, or shark DNA where if your teeth fall out new ones come in. Being able to fly, tougher skin, a tail, webbed feet and gills. There have been dozens of social experiments which should have been illegal in the past. The Little Albert experiment, Stanford prison study. Probably how to make humans conform more easily to authority. Just seems logical. I'd vote for eyesight. Human eyes are pathetic. Throw me some of those hawk eagle eyes or cat's night vision. Did you know birds can see and wolves can see infrared eat? Yeah. Jim, some of that too.